Well, hello there. Are you lost? Better come with me. I will lead you through these dark woods. Trust me. The terror draws near. Foul things everywhere. Creeping things emerge. Entities of evil surround No need to fear. Trust me. Don't worry, traveler. You have nothing to fear. For here, there is nothing but fear. Welcome to Nothing But Fear, the place where the moon laughs cruelly down upon us in this forest of horror, the place where your fears are exposed. Hello friends, welcome to episode 3 of Nothing But Fear. Though still in its infancy, the show seems to have developed quite the following. A testament, I suppose, to the alluring nature of Campfire in the night. If you believe that fire was stolen from the gods and given to man, this makes all the more sense. As a species, we're attracted to that which has been our earliest companion, other than each other, from Earth's earliest aeons. But come, join me round the campfire. If you forgot to bring goodies and beverages to distract you from the terror that I suspect shall haunt us this night, no need to worry. I have brought all the vintage wine and cheese we shall need from the cellars of our generous benefactor, G.M. Danielson. Vampire wine, I suppose, is suspect, especially any reds for obvious reasons. But then again, it's not real blood. Just rows upon rows of lavish claret, sanguine merlot, and fino amontillado, with the occasional imprisoned skeleton nearby. And the cheese, well, fermentation does come at a premium in a vampire's castle, all things considered. There's no need to fear. Or is there? As I was saying though, fire, depending on what you believe, has been one of mankind's earliest companions. It provides new ways for us to prepare food, offers protection from predators, and warms us through the cold night. And well may we be thankful for this last aspect of fire, for tonight our journey into terror takes us far to the north, where cold is as common a word as cloud and snow. Yes, tonight's stories take us through Russian wilds, and will teach us the unique fear found nowhere else but the motherland. In a country so physically snowbound and dark, fear seems right at home. I suspect this fear isn't conventional either, for hardship gives life to sinister horrors well beyond the sphere of the normal. Desperate fears tinged with the heartlessly cruel and unfeelingly purposed. With such grim prospects forecasted tonight, let me start things off gently, as I can, with our first story, Caviar. I've gone all over the world to find the best food. 6 continents, thousands of regions, countless dishes, all in search of the perfect meal. For a while, I thought it may never happen. There was always something a little off. Salt, freshness, temperature. Tiny, niggling complaints that, to anyone else, would be meaningless. To me, though, they were the difference between perfection and mundanity. Thus my quest went on. During my travels, I learned about an underground supper club in Moscow, which met once a year. While underground supper club sounds mysterious and illicit, it's just a place that operates casually, meaning without a food license. Chefs all over do it all the time for their friends. I've been to many. This one was supposed to be different, though. They had the best caviar. Caviar is a luxury dream, but even in luxury-obsessed Russia, it started to fall out of favor because of sustainability issues. It's still widely available, but the good stuff is getting harder and harder to find. The best stuff is nearly impossible to get a hold of. It's locked down by the oligarchs and heads of the state. If you're not one of them, or in close company, you're out of luck. So when I heard that the supper club would be serving the best of the best, I knew I had to get in there. And it wasn't easy. It took 4 bloody years to ingratiate myself with the influential Moscow foodies. I spent thousands upon thousands of euros at their restaurants, building a reputation, blogging BS about their food, and cultivating relationships. Vasily Prochenko, a restaurateur and minor celebrity in Moscow, noticed me. Over time, we became friends. I didn't know if he was privy to the supper club or not, but if anyone was, he had to be one of them. I didn't say anything, though. I waited. One afternoon, Vasily and I were talking about caviar, specifically the best sources. He mentioned the waters of Japan, which I found strange, since the Fukushima disaster had scared people away from certain types of fish in that area. He agreed that it was moderately disconcerting, but insisted that the caviar from the fish in those waters was sublime. Then it happened. "You know," he told me, "there's something even better. Something practically nobody knows about. Can you keep a secret?" I did my best to contain my excitement. This had been what I had been waiting for. "Of course," I told him, and leaned in to listen. Vasily told me about the supper club. There were 20 chefs, and a few of their close friends from all around the world. They met in a restaurant right down the street from Vasily's, and if I was willing to pitch in the 5,000 euro entry fee and keep my mouth shut, I would be allowed to attend. 1 hour and a trip to the bank later, I had the 5,000. All I had to do was wait. On the evening of the supper, I met with Vasily at his restaurant and had a drink. Then we walked down to the meeting place, which had a sign in front saying it was closed for the weekend. We walked around to the back of the kitchen and opened the door. The kitchen was full of chefs. Some of the chefs I recognized from my travels, but others were strangers. All were busy preparing dishes for the evening. We sat in the main dining room, and I admired the decor. The room was softly candlelit, and the windows had been covered in black paper. It was obvious this was a private event, and no prying eyes were allowed. "So, how does this all work?" I asked Vasily. "They just start bringing out the courses. They're small, obviously, so you can sample all of them. The caviar will be at the end, I think. It is the rarest and most special of all the dishes." True to his word, the food began to arrive. We were treated to sumptuous course upon course, prepared by the meticulous and downright genius minds of the master chefs. I must confess I ate and drank until my head spun. Vasily excused himself and went to the kitchen. I chatted with some of the other diners and learned many were like me, rich foodies looking to experience the best of the best. After a little while and a few more courses, someone near the kitchen clapped their hands to get everyone's attention. To my surprise, It was Vasily. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," he announced. "The evening, as always, has been an incredible success. We've sampled food from the greatest chefs around the world, and as is customary, we like to end the night with something very special. You all know I am passionate about my caviar. You've had the best from all over. Russia, Japan, Canada, etc., etc. Tonight, I have another treat. It's something extremely rare, and takes a very long time to produce in quantities fit for consumption." A parade of servers carrying silver trays emerged from the kitchen. They swarmed around the room, placing plates of food in front of each diner. Vasily continued, "This is the culmination of a year's work. I had to pull a lot of strings and grease a lot of palms to bring this to you tonight. But for the first time, I would like to share with you this caviar. It is without doubt the rarest caviar on the planet, and I believe it is the most exquisite as well. Please, please, enjoy." Everyone applauded, and Vasily bowed and came back to me. "I had no idea you were behind the caviar," I exclaimed. Vasily just grinned. "I wanted you to be surprised," he admitted. Now, please, eat. Let me know what you think." I looked down at my plate. There was a toast point, perfectly browned, covered with a reddish-brown paste. Atop the paste was a dollop of creme fraiche, flecked with green pieces of dill. Oh, my mouth watered. I brought it to my mouth and bit. My eyelids closed, and I chewed, savoring the taste. It was thick and briny, with distinct livery notes. It was unlike any caviar I'd had in the past, and it was undoubtedly spectacular. I took another bite, and then another. The complexity of the flavor profile was mind-boggling. Without realizing it, I began grinning like an idiot the whole time. Vasily asked, "So, what do you think?" I swallowed and said, "It's the most incredible thing I've ever tasted, Vasily. It's so smooth and buttery. There's none of the intense saltiness or pop of normal caviar, and I initially missed it. But the notes of the liver came through and coated my tongue. Where is it from?" "North Korea," Vasily said. "My God," I replied. "How did you get access to those waters without being shot?" "Well, here's the thing," Vasily told me. "I know a special person. He's a doctor over there." I picked up my last piece and ate it while Vasily talked. I knew I'd never be able to fish in North Korean waters. But the first time the doctor and I talked, I realized he had access to this caviar without even knowing it. Over the years, I paid him a lot of money to collect it for me. I looked up, puzzled. "So the doctor brought you the fish?" Vasily laughed. No. The doctor isn't a fisherman. He's a specialist. He has no time for fish." A specialist in what?" I inquired, profoundly confused. "Gynecology," Vasily told me. "They're really into forced sterilizations over there. It's bad for them, but great for us. Without it, we wouldn't have any of this caviar." The room seemed to darken, and I felt my mouth getting very wet and very dry at the same time. I formed the words, Vasily, what kind of caviar is this?" The chef grinned. Why, Lady Caviar. Now, don't accuse me of not starting us off gently into tonight's adventure. You forgot I said gently, as I can. Honestly, there really is no way to soften the blow of such brutal fears when the land of their origin often is just as brutal. Our only recourse, I fear, is to face these fears with the fire in our midst to warm us. But don't blame me if the warmth is only skin deep. There really is nothing for it but to press on into the deep snows of fear and to read our next chilling account. I'm a Russian child bride, or at least I was.
My name is Alisa, and I am from Russia, although I do not remember where in specific. I have been moved around very much in my life. I was born to an angry alcoholic and an ill woman. Although I can't remember her face or her name, I can remember so clearly her telling me, "Alisa, you are my miracle child. Never forget it." I never have, and I never will. My mother died sometime when I was either 10 or 11. My father's heart was broken, but it only made him crueler. He beat me ruthlessly for a year before becoming bored of me and selling me to a man for no more than what would be considered about $6 American. This man, in turn, put me into a large home with about 6 other girls, my age and older. At the time, I thought I had been orphaned. I know now that it was a waiting home for Russian brides. Although it's practiced much less, some men, mostly American, would rather go to Russia and marry their bride there than do the whole mail-order bride thing, which I never heard of until I moved to America. Many men would come and go. Some girls would go with them. Some stayed a little longer. We were taught very little English, but enough to entertain the men when they came. They thought we were funny. I lived in that home for an additional 2 years before I was chosen. The man of the home even joked that they would begin prostituting me had I started to mature any more. The man that chose me was nothing special. I will call him Stephen. He was a tall, thin American man. He was a bit pale and a little older, but I tried my best to smile. Girls who don't smile would often get abused much more. We traveled to many countries together, and his sexual appetites never waned. With every new place we visited, there were more child prostitutes or other brides with husbands who liked to watch. I couldn't have been more than 14 during my first orgy. I vomited afterwards. Stephen had said to me,
"You'll get used to it."
A year later, Stephen announced that we would be moving to America. By this time, I could speak fluent English, along with Spanish and French, and a little Japanese. Enough to say, "Yes, sir, I want some more." Days before we were to board the plane, he announced that he would be picking up a second bride. You would be surprised at how common it is for these men to take a second, and even a third bride. I felt sick, thinking that another girl would have to deal with what I did. But when I met her, something was off. She was a little bit older than me, maybe 15 or 16. She didn't seem frightened or nervous. She wore bright red lipstick and smiled a lot. I couldn't tell what ethnicity she was. She spoke very fluent English though, and her accent seemed to almost be a mix of several. She was so kind to me. Her name was Clara. We returned to America and arrived at his home. It is a small, one-story little house with 3 bedrooms. He had set up a room for us that had many things that a normal teenage girl would have. A little later that evening, Stephen began to drink, and I became very nervous. Stephen wasn't necessarily a mean drunk. He just became very sexual. He instructed the both of us to lie on the king-size bed and strip each other down. She didn't even blink. He continued to instruct us to do different things when Clara spoke up. "Come here, my love," she said as she wriggled an enticing finger, beckoning him towards the bed. "I want to play a game." I noticed something in her eyes seemed off. She gave me an almost sympathetic look. "Elisa, please move off the bed for a moment. I want to show our love something." Stephen seemed very surprised and very pleased. I did as instructed and moved off the bed and stood against the wall. She had him lie on his back while she straddled him. She whispered, no, almost hissed, "Do you want to know a secret?" He nodded excitedly. She sighed, took one more look at me, and then let out an inhuman scream. Just at that moment, her mouth shot open, and I know it sounds crazy, but sharp, monstrous teeth shot out from above her normal teeth. In one quick motion, she bent down and ripped out Stephen's throat before he could even react. I could barely breathe, and at that moment I thought I might die. However, Clara looked at me with that same sympathetic look, and I noticed she was no longer straddling him, but crouched over him in an animalistic way. "Go, darling, you are free," she said as the teeth receded and her body relaxed. "This devil has no power over you anymore." I stared for a moment, but I had wanted freedom for so long, and I bolted and never looked back. I never saw Clara, whatever she was, again. I ran and ran and ran until a cop finally picked me up, but by then I could barely speak. After that night, I was passed around from youth home to youth home before finally being fostered into a permanent home until adulthood. During that time, I went to a normal high school. I learned to be a normal girl. I had foster parents that knew of my past. Other than that one night, they only knew that Clara had helped me escape, and they took extra special care to help me recover and enter society as a normal woman. I never got that night out of my mind. Now I am 24. I am a college graduate, and I work for an organization to help emancipate women like myself. Those who were brides like myself, young girls sold into the sex trade, and even battered women. I had almost forgotten that night, until yesterday. I was put on a new case, a young Swedish girl. She called herself Lova. She seemed much more shaken than usual. While she told her story, she mentioned that her sister bride had helped her escape. A sister bride named Clara, with a beautiful smile and red lipstick.
Dare I say the next time you kiss a girl, especially if her name is Clara, to check if she has another set of teeth concealed in her mouth. Plus, if you love her and treat her right, especially by night, you're probably in the clear as well. Apologies if my horror has offended. What else am I to do with such terrifying stories as these? Just tell them? You could do just that. Excuse me, is someone there? Only me. I saw the campfire from afar. and I'm looking for a place to spend the night. Spend the night, yes. Well, we are spending part of the night telling stories. Or I am telling these fine people stories. Then what the hell are they doing here for? Just listening like dumb animals to you? Dumb animals isn't exactly how I would describe them. Well, if stories are to be told, I for one will not sit in silence. Excuse me, but who are you exactly? Pardon me, I am exhausted from my journey. It has been a long and cold one. I am Yuri Trepashkin. I came from city. And you are going... That does not matter, little man with somewhat scary voice. I am tired, and am in need of fire. Red wine, and moldy cheese. I have 2 bottles of stolitsnaya vodka in my sack, and some cans of fish. You tell scary story around campfire like old movie, no? Yes, actually. And interestingly, tonight I have been telling scary stories about Russia. But you are not Russian. Yes, I know. And what are these stories? Well, the first was about a new type of caviar that actually was made from ladies, and the second story was about the rescue of an abused Russian child bride by a vengeful girl with terrible teeth. Too many stories about women with plot like Hammer film. Russia is not like that. So there is no fear, no strangeness in your country? Oh, there is fear and strangeness, but not this pussy variety you have been telling. Here, cook some of my fish over the fire, while I tell you a real story about Mother Russia. All right. What is it about? My father, who was a safety officer at Chernobyl during the meltdown, before he died. I won't give a long backstory, because it doesn't matter. Basically, he got a job through a former schoolmate of his, who worked in some mid-level party position. Father was always down on his luck, and this time was no different. At this time, his friend Igor happened to see him at the local bar. They got to talking, and Igor pulled some strings and gave him the position. Didn't matter that he wasn't qualified. Half the guys aren't, he was told. Anyway, Dad started working there in 1984 and did a pretty good job. He did as he was told. Most of it was just checking dial readouts and making sure pipes were sealed and whatnot. In late 1985 and early 1986, he started noticing far more party representatives coming in and out of the plant. Usually the visits were limited to compliance officers and hazardous material supervisors when radioactive material was moved in or out. But these weren't plant specialists. They looked like Politburo. He told me he recognized a couple of them from television speeches, but he didn't remember the names. He just knew they were high-ranking. On the night of meltdown, Dad was doing his usual valve and dial checks when Politburo members, accompanied by soldiers with loaded Kalashnikovs, streamed down the hall toward the reactor area. The soldiers were wearing radiation suits of all things. The party members weren't. He tagged along a few dozen meters away and went on a catwalk high up where he could see all of them. They crowded around cooling pools. Dad made an effort to act as if he was staring at the pressure readouts in front of him, vaguely noticing they were rising as he watched. This was around the point when the lights cut out. Apparently, this wasn't abnormal for the plant. The electrical systems were under-maintained, and all of the electricians on staff were tasked with more critical reactor work. Even with the lights not working, Cherenkov radiation cast its characteristic blue glow over the group and illuminated the politicians and soldiers. The water in the pool started moving. Now, Father wasn't a nuclear engineer. Still, he knew whatever was happening in the pool was abnormal. He'd been by the area plenty of times, and never once did the water move like it did right then. It sloshed with turbidity and looked like it was coming to a rolling boil. He glanced at the dials in front of him and saw the temperature and pressure in the loop system was dramatically higher than it should have been. As he was beginning to sprint across the catwalk toward the nearest alarm station, he saw something that made him stop. What he told me then didn't make much sense at first. You have to figure someone running at a dead sprint to pull an emergency alarm at the nuclear power plant station wouldn't stop for anything. But he stopped. And he stared. Something had floated to the top of the boiling water. The way he described it, it was dark, grayish red, almost shaped like a person, but much bigger and dreadfully deformed. It floated face down in the pool. The party members didn't react, but the soldiers raised their rifles at the thing, until one of the politicians barked order at them to stand down. A moment or two later, and the thing crawled out of the pool and raised itself on thick legs to stand before the gathered crowd. What Father said he remembered most about the thing was its head. It sat directly on top of its lopsided shoulders, and it had no eyes, no ears, no nose. All that was there was a gaping hole. Not even a mouth, but a hole. And inside, the same blue glow from the pool shone out onto the faces of the people surrounding it. Someone else at the plant must have noticed the temperature and pressure abnormalities and pulled the alarm, because sirens began to blare and diesel generators were galvanized into action to force the cooling cycle into overdrive. None of that mattered to Father, though. He said the thing approached the soldiers, one by one, and without any of them putting up a fight, it pressed the hole in its face against the top of each of their heads, and they started to dissolve. First their suits melted, and then their skin began to blister and char. The thing moved its maw downward until it nearly reached their legs, which dropped to the ground in smoldering heap. It then did the same to the assembled Politburo. All but one. She stood in the middle of the pile of streaming legs and hips and crotches and stared at the atrocity. Then she screamed at it. It's something Father said he's repeated to himself every day since. Zalitso na poshve, salt of the earth. As the words left her mouth, the Geiger counter Father was forced to carry with him at all times exploded into life. At the same instant, the politician burst into flames. He could swear she smiled as she burned. All this was finally enough for Dad to make a break for it. He knew he'd been irradiated badly, but he took some solace in the fact that the ticks in the counter slowed quickly as he left the pool area. Right before he was clear of the room, he took one last glimpse at the thing. It had begun to melt. As soon as its body began pouring through the metal grate, the water below erupted in a mass of superheated steam. Father avoided being scalded to death by about half a second when he turned the corner and slammed the door behind him. The rest of the meltdown played out more or less like it was eventually reported. Father was able to get out before the main explosions. He lived with the profound guilt of running by his colleagues, who still didn't know something truly catastrophic was about to happen. He believed his thyroid cancer was payment for his indifference toward them during his escape. The iconic photograph of the radioactive elephant's foot in the basement of the power plant stood framed on his dresser for the rest of his life. As he told me this story, he confessed he kept it to remind him of the implications of the politician's words before she was devoured by the flames. That thing will render the area around it uninhabitable for 100 years, he sighed. It's melting through the ground, even today. If it hits the groundwater, it'll explode like a dirty bomb and make the disaster in '86 look like a firecracker. Russia, Europe, North Africa, all irradiated. He died a couple of days after he shared his experience with me. I just have no idea what to do with it all. Obviously, he couldn't have made the whole thing up, but I don't know why he would. He doesn't have anything to gain now that he's gone. Maybe some of the other survivors or their kids can corroborate parts of what he said. Maybe they can't. Either way, if it's true, there is so much more going on with that disaster than we've been told. Even now, as that radioactive slag melts into the ground, Father's story almost makes it sound like the meltdown was just a precursor to something far worse. Something plotted. Please, if anyone can give some advice or insight, it would be appreciated. I don't want what he told me to be true, but Zalitsona Poshva terrifies me more than I can bear. My goodness. None of the documentaries or news clippings talk of a monster hidden in the reactor coolant. Do you think it was part of an occult practice on the part of the Politburo? I do not know. All I know is that my father died soon upon telling me the secret. I have wanted to share the secret for years. I suppose this was the right time. Well, I'm sorry for your loss, especially the circumstances surrounding it. Did you leave Russia soon after his passing? No. I moved far east out of fear from the radiation and the monster. I knew I had to get as far away from it as I could. The sea has always called to me, so I went east across the country, taking whatever job I could find, until I found a small fishing town by the Sea of Okhotsk. Things were wonderful and simple there. I fished peacefully for years by the surrounding islands. Until one day, the government came. What happened? Do you really want to know? Well, then shut up while I tell you. I live in Russia, and the government has turned my town into some kind of sick experiment. There's really no other way to put it. I wasn't one of the people to be afraid of the government, but now I'm genuinely terrified of them. I live on one of 2 islands in the Sea of Okhotsk. They were once part of the same fishing town. 2 years ago, every form of outside communication failed to work here. A week later, 2 Russian military ships showed up and surrounded the 2 islands. They sat there in harbor for days, shooting anyone that tried to pass by. On the 5th day, a small boat was sent to shore. We were told the rest of the world had been infected by a virus, and that we were the only ones that had survived. The story was clearly a lie, and we knew that from the start. I was making my way back to my house from the local grocery store when I heard the news. None of it made any sense. Over the next week, soldiers raided the islands, taking any form of technology we had. In an instant, our lives had been taken over. We were all forced to leave our homes, being jammed in an old rundown hotel. They gave us all jobs to keep the community alive. I was in the lead of 7 fishing boats. Now I pull a damn hoe. The other island has gone dark. We have not heard from them in a while. Every time it rains, we can hear screams carry across the water. Last year, I was even beginning to believe the lies. I was having the right thoughts. Maybe this is what's best. They're keeping us safe. That week, a plane flew over the island. People began to try to resist once again. It was like when they first arrived. Quickly, the soldiers began to take some of them onto the small boats, taking the people to the other island. Like a prison, there are people here that bribe the soldiers. Last month, someone got a phone call. They cried as they called their family, trying to explain our situation as fast as they could. It only took minutes for the soldiers to find her and put her on the boat. I was there. I saw it, but no one believes me. I think they do, but they just don't want to. I honestly don't know what to do. I am a prisoner. At sometimes I feel so close to escaping. I run the idea over in my head. I just need to contact the right person. But it's not possible. I killed a guard yesterday. They're already coming for me. I tried calling my family on the man's phone, but they didn't answer. Instead, another family did. I'm trying to write this as fast as I can. Please, please, someone help me. Help the people here. We are near 5644. Please, tell people. This is wrong. People can't live like this. I'm begging you. Help. And this event is what finally brought me to America. I am tired of the lies, the deceit, the secret evil of my country. But now that I am here, it seems you have similar secret evil. How so? Well, as I came this way, I walked by a strange castle with caped men glaring through windows high above me. Ah yes, well that is our benefactor here. It is on his grounds where we hold our little events. He's a vampire. I noticed, and I think it is time for me to leave. Blood-sucking things annoy me. Well, won't you stay and eat your fish that I've been patiently holding? No, that I can carry and eat along my way. Besides, I have been sitting long enough. And if you plan to continue telling stories after I leave, I don't want to hear what other drivel you have to tell about Russia. No true Russian story can be told by just anyone other than a Russian. And the stories have to be tediously grim and dark like Russian pine forest, not quaint and flowery like movie. Now I must be off. Remember what I've told you, and make sure to tell your government. The more we share, the less evil can hide. Farewell. Well, It was quite the experience. I think on that note we shall end tonight's adventure, friends. I do believe I shall have a conversation with old Danielson about the squatters and migrants he allows to cross his property. Not that Yuri wasn't one of the more entertaining guests I've had, but Danielson might want to know. Or then again, maybe not. Keep a weather eye on your digital mailboxes and social media for my next invitation to Season 1, Episode 4 of Nothing But Fear. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet for even more horror. Though after tonight, I suspect many of you will start lobbying your local governments as to their stance on nuclear power plants and their policies on eminent domain. Till next time, listeners. Forgive me if I haven't allayed what dread you brought with you into this wood. Not that there is much I can do about it anyway. For here, there is nothing but fear.